Hey everyone, welcome to a new series that we're calling Black Excellence in Iowa. Today you're going to find me with Tunisha May, formerly known as Tunisha Billings, Mrs. Billings. She was my English teacher at West High School, and she was an incredible teacher. I was also part of the debate team, so she holds a special place in my heart and my development as a person that talks a lot, so that's really great, and as a learner as well. Could you please tell us your pronouns of reference and where you work currently?
Okay, I'm she or her, and I work at East High School right now as a consulting teacher.
Oh, great. So kind of what does your day-to-day look like in that position in education?
I don't have a schedule, but that's good because I run around and put out little fires here and there, but I also help teachers develop technology in the classroom. So I'm the
Mhm.
blended learning um, specialist, and I can't ask for anything better. Just having something different every day, challenging people, not only teachers, but challenging students to use technology in an educational manner. It's a lot of fun.
That's really great. You have like a leadership position and you really
Mhm.
could, and so there's many opportunities to grow beyond the teaching role in education. And that's what I'm trying to show my students that there's so many different facets
Yes.
to education, right? So where did you grow up originally? And where did you go to high school?
I actually grew up right here in Sioux City, Iowa. I went to high school at North High way back when. um, and then I stayed around by attending University of South Dakota on a track scholarship. And that's where I decided to become a teacher. And then my first job was right back at North High. So,
Wow, the University of South Dakota, and you were an athlete, which is really cool. And you study, what did you study again?
well, I started out with language arts
Mhm.
and I was going to go into editing. And then the wonderful Nancy Mounts, if anybody remembers her, she was a beautiful soul, another teacher, pulled me aside and said, nope, you need to be a teacher because other kids who look like you need to see you. So
Yeah.
I took that to heart and went back, picked up my education courses, and then became a teacher.
Wow, was there anything else that you were considering when you entered college?
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. When you get there, you kind of think, wow, I could be anything I want, and that's true. So business was in there, some business stuff was in there. I actually thought about maybe even just becoming a professional athlete. I mean, that was you know,
Mhm.
uh, that kind of changed things when you start having a family. So that
Mhm.
didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, you could almost do anything. But like I said, hearing another educator
Mhm.
believe in me and tell me that I have a role that I can play.
Mhm.
That hit home. So I took that to heart and went from there.
Yeah, and that's like where your passion and drive for education comes. And but on the English side, what made you know that you wanted to work in editing or you wanted to kind of work in the
Mhm.
English field?
I think it was just my drive towards reading. I
Hmm.
always was a reader as a kid, and my mother used to read to me too, some of her books when she was in college when I was younger. So I just always remember reading and reading being kind of an escape. I didn't have the greatest home life. I had
Hmm.
a pretty bad upbringing, but my mom tried to make it as, best she could. But I think I could escape and all that reading. And as I started to get older with that, I just said, hey, you know what? There's more to this reading thing.
Hmm.
There's the writing piece. There's a speaking piece,
Hmm.
then the
Hmm.
listening piece,
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
all of that started to come together for me as I got a little bit older, taking different courses, that type of stuff. And I started to say, hey, you know what? I got a knack for this. So just started really working hard at the language arts.
Yeah, when you kind of have something that you're passionate about, but also good at, you that's why it's important for everyone to start kind of figuring out what am I good at? What am I passionate about, right?
Mhm.
And then those two things will lead you to a clearer path, right? And then yours
Yes,
was education, right?
right,
And
right,
then now you're in a leadership position in education, which is
right.
great. So could you tell us a little bit about your experience as an athlete in college? Was it difficult to balance being a student and an athlete?
Absolutely. Being a coach now, because I've been a coach for a long time, and I coach many different things. Um, it is tough, and I do tell students, if you're going to choose to do that, because it's a choice, just remember that that choice has very substantial consequences, and those consequences are time consuming. And if you don't have that ability to schedule yourself, manage your time, that it's almost impossible to do it because that becomes your job basically in college. So not only are you a student, which you have to be, believe me, that's People think, oh, I can get to college and be an athlete, not have to study. No, no, no. It makes it worse. You're actually under a microscope more than anybody else. You have to have those courses. You have to pass them. Those are all there. Um, but if you don't have that time management ability before you get there, I've watched a lot of student athletes drop out because of that. Handling the pressure of taking full credit courses, 12 credits and up a semester, and still going to your practices and doing all of your contests. And you don't have time for a lot of extra stuff. So I always tell people, you got to be ready. You got to be serious about this because it becomes your job. Your first job, of course, is being a student, but your second job would be being that athlete. So it's difficult, but it's definitely can be done.
Yeah, and it's definitely important to kind of like take that into consideration because sometimes when you kind of like go to college, people typically either like tend to leave everything behind. They don't get a job, they don't get involved with student organizations or
Right.
any leadership roles. They kind of just want to be a student. And when
Yep.
that happens on the opposite side of the athlete side is you have too much time. And so
Yes.
your scheduling has to become more intentional and you have to be very
Yes.
aware of it. And that's a skill that takes time to practice. I wasn't perfect at it. I'm still not perfect at it, but
Yep.
it's a skill that I'm practicing more and more as we go along.
Right.
So your experience as an athlete, I know that you were a very great athlete and you're very successful now in your career and education. Um, I guess, what does success mean to you?
Success to me is if I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I am. And that can change, of course. Different things make you happy for sure. But when you're waking up every day and you're thinking, yes, this is what I want to be doing at this time, that's success for me. But like I said, you can wake up one day and say, nope, this is not what I want to do anymore. That means you have to start working towards your next goal, right? And then when you wake up and say, yep, this is what I want to do, you are then successful again. So I try not to make it a very concrete, wording for success. It's really me waking up saying, yes, this is what I want to do. I love this. So
Yeah, waking up and feeling that fulfillment and that motivation, that passion is
yeah.
still super important. And if that drive is like going away, that means you have to keep learning and growing in some way because that
Yes.
you're in that safe space where like the comfortable zone.
Mhm.
Um, So, and then expanding on college, I know there's tons of resources that I always
Mhm.
talk about with my students. Is there any resources that really helped you be a successful student at USD?
Um, I would say that the only thing I would say is like there's nothing in a book or anything you're going to read. The more you can talk, like you are doing right now, the better off you'll be. So when you get to your college, really get to your counselor because that counselor is there for you. And don't feel like you are intruding or asking too many questions. You're going to ask too many questions. But get to that counselor immediately and start building that relationship with the counselor because that becomes your lifeline. And so then you can go to that counselor and say, I am just having troubles in this course. I'm not sure if it's for me. And you would be amazed at wonderful things that they can find for you to maybe switch to a different course or maybe even change your perspective on that course and say, hey, you only have to do this, and get through it and you can move on. So I'm telling you right now, I had a great counselor at USD. Um, I had the best time ever because every time something came up with course selection or me struggling in a course or something of that sort, I went right to my counselor. And he always had something like for me. It may not have been what I wanted to hear sometimes, but he always had it. So I would definitely say use your counselor that's assigned to you.
And one final question, just to kind of wrap up our conversation and center it around the college experience around and being Black. So, what advice do you have for future Black college students, or what is something that you wish you would have known as a student yourself?
I wish I would have known that there are actual groups on the college campus for people of color. Um, I was so busy with athletics and school that I just felt like I didn't have time, to get to those or even search them out. But I wish I had stopped and done that because I would have made more connections. I made some good connections in athletics for sure. I mean, I still talk to a lot of my former friends and that were athletes that were also of color. And we talk a lot. We talk a lot about meeting again and maybe having like a little reunion, that kind of stuff. So that was fun. But I probably would have been able to meet more people if I actually got together with our groups, our multicultural groups that are actually on the campuses. And there's so many more of them now than when what we had, back then. So I would say that was the one thing I wish I would have done and known more about. And I would suggest you do that because it's nice to have that person to kind of say, you feel what I'm feeling, right? And they're like, yeah, you have that camaraderie, that empathy that you can get. And then you guys can, brainstorm together on some solutions on some issues for yourselves and move on. Like I said, no one can get through this alone, and you got to have that person you can go to. And I just wish I would have gone to those multicultural groups and founded a little bit more of those educational relationships. But I still enjoy my athletic ones too.
Yeah, solidarity is a huge component when you're a person of color or of any other marginalized identity, and having that in college is super important. But even just building a community in
Mhm.
general is one of the most important things you can do in college because that's what keeps you there.
Yes,
And community is everything, especially
yes,
for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. I know community is an integral part of our cultures, and that solidarity will keep us going, right? And even like going
right,
to your counselor, for example, like we mentioned, having that connection and going to them is
right.
building a network already,
Yes,
and that
yes,
keeps you grounded and not like, and you don't have to do anything by yourself, which is
right.
important. And it's good that, and you should look for those groups,
Absolutely.
those identity-based groups on campuses.
Yep.
And I know you mentioned that sometimes in previous conversations you mentioned that it's sometimes difficult to like approach situations as a Black professional because there's
Yep.
people that are going to have these implicit biases about you, and you
Yes.
have to break down those walls. Could you tell us about
Yes.
that?
Yeah, that's the one thing I was saying before, that that's difficult to do, and that's that you have to kind of work double. You have to work a little harder
Hmm.
when you've heard those sayings, and that's, I think, where they're what they're meaning. Not necessarily physically harder, but
Hmm.
mentally harder for sure. So when my job is I have to go in and I have to help people, and I have to make sure that they understand what they about the technology that they need, and I can't leave until they do. And if someone has a bias about me, I still have to help that person.
Hmm.
So I can't just walk away. So I have to learn how to deal with that. I have to learn how to see that person as a human being as well. Like, not everybody who has an outlook of you is a bad person. They just maybe have heard certain things and have grew up that way, and that's just how it is. And I have to be that person that when they see me, they're like, wait a minute, um, she's not like that, or she's not what I thought she would be. And I have to keep showing them that I'm not an exception to the rule. You just have to get to know everybody as they are. You can't make those predetermined, situations. So I can't go in angry and I can't go in upset and I can't, I have to check those things at the door. But by no means, I don't let anybody, of course, disrespect me. No one should disrespect you. But you have to understand where some of the people are coming from and where their viewpoints are coming from. And you have to kind of work through that. So that's kind of what I mean by working a little bit harder. When you hear that you have to kind of work twice as hard as a person of color in employment. And I think that's what they mean, the mental taxation every day of having to break through those barriers. And it's every single day. You don't get a day off on that. So
Yeah, it's
hopefully one day we will. That's the goal.
yeah.
But for now, you just have to know what's coming and be ready.
And that's the important part about having a community, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
have that community bounce back to after having these stressful interactions, that
Yes.
makes it all the easier to kind of keep pushing forward and have that grit, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And I just want to say, I wish more people of color would go into education.
mhm.
There's a lot of us, yes, but not enough, right? And when I'm having a bad day, I hate to say this, but I can't go to another faculty member in this building that's going to understand what I just went through. Because I am the only Black female staff member here. We have some coaches and that type of stuff, but full-time staff member. So it's like I would love to have conversations with others to say, hey, maybe even I saw it wrong, or maybe even I, heard it wrong or picked up on it wrong. Um, but it's difficult because I know people want to talk to me and they want to give me that basic knowledge, but they just don't have it. They can't because they aren't me, right? They don't look like me. So I want more students to think about that. Like really think about the the impact you can have as a person of color in a student's life, to have them see you in that position. Then that thought process of, wait a minute, if she's there, I can get there. Now, how do I do that? Then you're like, you need to come talk to me. right? Because then I'm going to start giving you stuff to do to help you get to this point where I am. But then, of course, I'm going to teach you to get better, right? I want you to move past me. I want you to get into those upper areas because I also want to be very proud to see people who look like me and us up there as well, helping making those decisions from the top. Um, so I really want to push your listeners and your viewers that education is really where we need you now. We need people of color in our realms every single day, walking through the halls, showing kids, hey, you can do this. I did it, you can do it. So please think about it.
Education is foundational for any, society, right? And I think, and especially in the Midwest, I think it's
Mhm.
super important and super impactful. And the work you're doing is very important. I thank you for sharing with my students your experience, and I know that they're gonna feel represented. And I feel like the work you're doing is so incredible. And thank you so much for everything,
Thank
Tanisha.
you, Victor.